Thank you, Madari, for joining us again. Last time we met, we spoke extensively about some of the struggles you had getting a visa to do rotations and then to come to the States for residency, and then subsequently some of the transitional difficulties that you had that I'm sure lots of international medical graduate students face when they are making the transition. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to that episode, please do so. It was really quite enlightening. Today, what we want to do is to talk about how these various issues impacted you mentally, and how you overcame them or how you managed them. So why don't you start with that? How do you think, what was the impact that some of these struggles or barriers had on you?
Yes, thank you. So first, I'll begin to say, because of the career I chose, that in itself has its own stresses and adjustments that you have to make. Now, to pile on top of that, I have everything else going on, trying to get transportation, trying to settle into where I am, trying to adjust to how the system works up here, and all of that piles on. And then to add to that, I don't really have any family or close friends in this area of the US. I would say I begin to learn a lot about myself in terms of how my body responds to stress. I'm from a culture, and unfortunately, in some instances where we do not speak a lot about, you know, how stress affects us. We have this society where, it's, get over it, or you would mention your struggles and somebody say, we all went through it. So, no worries. And it's sort of brushed aside. So growing up, I'm not accustomed to, speaking about these things or looking out for these things, in my personal life. But one thing, I got to learn about myself going through all of this is I get affected with sleep. Now, I guess for some people, just depending on, how you react to certain things, you may sleep less, you may sleep more. For me, I slept less. So, I would say my usual bedtime would probably be about 11:30 or so. As things began to get more stressful, I stayed up later at night, and obviously that's going to affect me the next day because I'm not getting enough sleep. That's one thing I had to learn about myself, in that that's how my body was reacting to stress. And then that obviously piled on to the mental exhaustion of having to live up to, the demands of my job. And as I said, I did not start with an easy sort of residency. I started, which is what we call OB, obstetrics inpatient. And so that in itself was a very taxing rotation. And so, having to adjust to all those things was very stressful. I would say one of the biggest ways, and this is something I would recommend to everyone.
Before you even go there, you mentioned something that I want to highlight. Sleep is so very important. And even a decreased amount of sleep compared to what you regularly get can lead to inflammation in the body and all kinds of other things. You might not even realize that you have less emotional bandwidth. You might be more irritable. It might be more difficult for you to manage constructive critique or be with loved ones. So, what you're talking about is really quite serious. And then it's troublesome when you are not able to naturally fall asleep. So you have, in a way, kind of lost control of this very important thing.
Mhm.
And that can lead to increased anxiety. If you're very tired and you want to get to bed, but then you're staying up late and you're looking at the clock. So I really empathize with what you're sharing here because it can have so much ripple effects in your life, not being able to sleep, not being able to fall asleep, especially when you're doing something that's very demanding or have other external stressors in your life.
Yes, I agree. And so I had to fall back on those things that I mentioned in my interview application for residency, because that's one of the things they do ask you. So, what do you do outside of residency? What are the things you do for fun? I now had to make sure that I go back to those things. So, for me, I enjoy going for a run. So, I do have a sports background.